The warning lights turned red across every screen in the command center. High Matriarch Sylveth stood at the center of the room, her forearms pressed against the cold metal railing as she watched the enemy ships appear on the sensors. There were too many of them. Far too many. 40 warships, her communications officer said. His voice was shaking. They found us. Sylveth closed her compound eyes for a moment. The Veloxi had been running for 30 years. 30 years of hiding in empty space, moving from asteroid to asteroid, always staying one step ahead of the Kreth Dominion. But now, in this forgotten corner of the Outer Veil Nebula, their luck had finally run out. The Kreth were slavers. They had conquered 100 worlds and taken billions of beings to work in their mines and fight in their gladiatorial pits. The Veloxi had refused to surrender when the Kreth first came to their homeworld. They had fought back. And for that crime, the Kreth had hunted them across the galaxy like animals. How long until they reach us? Sylveth asked. 3 hours, maybe less. She looked around the command center at her people. They were tired. Their shells were cracked from years of poor nutrition. Their eyes had lost the brightness that Veluxi were known for. They had fought so hard and so long, but now there was nothing left to fight with. Their fleet was down to 6 patrol ships. Their weapons were old and weak. Against 40 Kreth dreadnoughts, they would last perhaps 5 minutes. Let's begin evacuation procedures, she ordered. Get the children to the escape pods. Matriarch, another officer, spoke up. The escape pods cannot outrun Kreth pursuit vessels. If we launch them, the Kreth will simply capture everyone aboard. Sylveth knew this. She had known it the moment the enemy appeared on their sensors. There was no escape. There was no hope. The Veloxi Collective, once a proud federation of 12 worlds, would end here in this cold station at the edge of known space, unless she did the unthinkable. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel on frequency 77 Alpha. The officer's antennae went rigid with shock. Matriarch, that frequency broadcasts toward Sector 7G, the Forbidden Zone. The Galactic Council sealed that entire region centuries ago. We are not supposed to make contact with anything there. I know what the Council said. The warnings are clear. The beings in that sector are dangerous beyond measure. Every species that has contacted them has regretted it. Sylveth looked at the sensor display. The Kreth ships were getting closer. In 3 hours, her people would be dead or in chains. What did she have to lose? Open the channel, she repeated. Send a distress signal. Tell them we are under attack. Tell them we need help. The officer hesitated for a long moment. Then, with trembling claws, he activated the forbidden frequency. The message went out into the void. Sylveth did not expect a response. The stories said that the beings in Sector 7G were monsters. They said that long ago. These creatures had waged wars so terrible that the rest of the galaxy had agreed to pretend they did not exist. Perhaps the stories were true. Perhaps the Forbidden Zone was empty. Perhaps no one would hear her desperate cry for help. The response came in less than 2 minutes. A voice filled the command center. It spoke perfect Veluxi, without any accent or error. The words were calm and clear and somehow warm. Distress signal received. Identify the nature of your threat. Help is already en route. Sylveth felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Real hope. Someone had heard them. Someone was coming. This is High Matriarch Sylveth of the Veluxi Collective, she transmitted back. We are a refugee station with 12,000 civilians. We are being attacked by the Kreth Dominion. 40 warships. We have no way to defend ourselves. There was a brief pause. Then the voice returned. Understood, Matriarch. Terran Hunter Fleet Designation Silent Judgment is burning toward your position at maximum speed. Estimated arrival time is 47 minutes. Can you hold until then? Sylveth's hearts began to beat faster. 47 minutes? The Kreth would not reach them for 3 hours. Help would arrive first. Yes, she said. Yes, we can hold. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do not thank us yet, Matriarch. Stay away from the viewing ports when we arrive. Our methods of combat can be disturbing to witness. The channel closed. Sylveth turned to her communications officer. He was staring at his console with wide eyes. "Who are they?" she asked. "These Terrans." "What do our records say?" The officer's claws moved across the controls. Information appeared on the main screen. Species designation: Human, Homeworld, Earth, Sector 7G classification, Apex Predator. Status: Quarantined by mutual agreement with Galactic Council. Sylveth read further. The humans had been discovered 2,000 years ago by a Galactic Council survey ship. First contact had gone well at first. The humans seemed friendly. They were curious and creative and eager to learn about the galaxy. Then the Vorthax. Empire made a mistake. The Vorthax were conquerors. Much like the Kreth, they saw the humans as easy targets. They attacked Earth with a fleet of 200 ships, tending to enslave the entire planet. 6 months later, the Vorthax Empire no longer existed. The humans had not just defended themselves. They had tracked down every Vorthax colony, every military base, every ship. They had hunted the Vorthax across the galaxy with a patience and determination that terrified everyone who watched. And when it was over, when the last Vorthax warship had been destroyed, the humans had simply gone home. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. They decided that the humans were too dangerous to interact with. Not because the humans were evil, but because they were too good at war. Too efficient. Too thorough. When humans identified something as a threat, they did not stop until that threat was completely eliminated. The humans agreed to stay in their own sector. They said they had no interest in conquest. They said they only wanted to be left alone. The council was happy to grant that wish, but now Sylveth had called them. She had begged them to come, and they were on their way. She looked at the classification on the screen again. Apex Predator. The words seemed wrong somehow. The voice on the communication channel had been so gentle, so reassuring. Her communications officer pointed at another line of text. Ship classifications for incoming fleet. Hunter Fleet. Apex. Predator Retrieval and Elimination Armada. Sylveth felt a chill run through her body. She had wanted saviors. She had called for help from anyone who would listen. But looking at those words, she began to understand why the galaxy had sealed Sector 7G. She had not called for saviors. She had called for hunters. And in 47 minutes, she would see exactly what that meant. War Master Gorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, and watched the Veluxy station grow larger on his view screen. He was a massive creature, even by Kreth standards. His scales were dark green, almost black, and covered with the ritual scars that marked him as a veteran of 50 campaigns. He had personally conquered 11 worlds. He had sent millions of beings to the slave pits. And now he would finally crush the last of the Veluxy resistance. "Signal the station," he ordered. "Tell them they have one chance to surrender. Anyone who does not comply will be killed slowly." His communications officer obeyed. The message went out. Gorath waited for the response, expecting begging and crying and promises to cooperate. The Veluxy were weak. They always broke in the end, but the response did not come from the station. Instead, his sensor officer suddenly screamed, "War Master. New contacts. Ships appearing directly ahead." Gorath spun around to face the tactical display. 11 ships had appeared from faster-than-light travel directly between his fleet and the Veluxy station. They had dropped out of hyperspace at close range, something that should have been impossible. The gravitational forces alone should have torn them apart. But there they were. 11 black vessels, smaller than his dreadnoughts, but covered with strange markings. Gorath looked closer and saw that the markings were tally marks. Hundreds and hundreds of tally marks, painted in red across the dark hulls. "What are those ships?" he demanded. "Where did they come from?" Before anyone could answer, a transmission cut through all of his fleet's communications. It bypassed their encryption. It overrode their jamming systems. It simply appeared, as if Kreth's security did not exist at all. A voice spoke. It was calm and clear and spoke perfect Kreth. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen, of the Terran Hunter Fleet's Silent Judgment. You are targeting vessels under our protection. You have 60 seconds to withdraw." Gorath stared at his view screen. Terran. He had heard that word before, long ago. Some ancient species from the Forbidden Sector. Ghost stories that commanders told to frighten new recruits. Nothing real. Nothing that mattered. 11 ships, he said slowly. They send 11 ships against my 40 dreadnoughts. He began to laugh. His officers joined him, nervous at first, then louder. "Signal all ships," Gorath commanded. "Open fire. Destroy these fools." 40 Kreth dreadnoughts turned their weapons toward the human fleet. Thousands of energy cannons powered up. Missile tubes opened. In seconds, a wall of destruction launched toward the 11 black ships. The humans did not raise shields. They did not attempt to flee. They simply moved. Gorath had fought many enemies in his long career. He had seen fast ships and skilled pilots, but he had never seen anything like this. The human vessels danced through the barrage as if they could see every shot before it was fired. They twisted and turned and rolled with a grace that seemed almost lazy. Not a single weapon touched them. Then they fired back. Gorath did not see what hit his lead dreadnought. There was no visible beam, no missile trail. One moment the ship was there. The next moment it was coming apart. But it did not explode. It simply fell to pieces, its hull separating along precise lines as if cut by invisible blades. The second dreadnought followed. Then the third. Then the fourth. Return fire. Gorath screamed. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead enemy vessel." His fleet obeyed. Hundreds of weapons focused on a single human ship. The amount of firepower would have destroyed a small moon. But the human ship was no longer where it had been. It had moved impossibly fast. It was now behind the Kreth formation. More dreadnoughts died. Gorath watched his tactical display with growing horror. The human ships were not just fast. They were not just maneuverable. They were operating with perfect coordination, as if guided by a single mind. They knew exactly where every Kreth ship would be before it got there. They struck weak points that Kreth engineers had thought were secret. They disabled weapons and engines with surgical precision. In 5 minutes, 10 dreadnoughts had been destroyed. In 7 minutes, 15 were gone. "War Master," his first officer said, his voice shaking badly, "we cannot win this fight. We must retreat." Gorath wanted to argue. He wanted to order his remaining ships to fight to the death, but he looked at the tactical display and saw the truth. 23 of his ships were already drifting wreckage. The remaining 17 were damaged and afraid, and the 11 human ships had not taken a single hit. "All ships," Gorath said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "Retreat. Maximum speed. Fall back to Dominion space." The Kreth fleet turned and ran. The human ships did not pursue. They simply held position, standing guard between the fleeing enemy and the Veluxy station. On that station, High Matriarch Sylveth watched everything through her command center screens. Her compound eyes were wide. Her forearms hung limp at her sides. She could not process what she had just witnessed. The battle had lasted 11 minutes. In 11 minutes, the humans had destroyed 23 Kreth warships while taking no damage at all. They had broken the back of a fleet that should have crushed them easily. "Those tally marks on their hulls," her communications officer whispered. "Matriarch, I think those marks represent kills. Ships they have destroyed." There were hundreds of marks on each vessel. Sylveth said nothing. She was remembering the warning she had read in the Galactic database. Apex Predator. Quarantined by mutual agreement. She had thought the humans were quarantined because they were dangerous to others. Now she understood the truth. The humans had quarantined themselves because they were too good at killing. Because when they decided something was a threat, they did not stop until it was gone. The Kreth had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. They were the monsters that other species told stories about. But in 11 minutes, the humans had made the Kreth run away like frightened children. Sylveth looked at the black ships floating silently in space. She had called for help, and help had come. But now, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. She had wanted protectors. What she had gotten were predators, and predators, she knew, were never truly safe. A new transmission arrived from the human fleet. It was the same calm voice as before. Matriarch Sylveth. The immediate threat has been neutralized. I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen. With your permission, I would like to board your station to discuss the situation. I will come alone and unarmed. Alone and unarmed. After what she had just watched, those words meant nothing. A being capable of commanding such destruction did not need weapons to be dangerous, but what choice did she have? Permission granted, she replied. I will meet you at Docking Bay 7. She turned to leave the command center. Her officers looked at her with fear in their eyes. None of them wanted her to meet the human alone. None of them wanted to find out what these creatures really wanted. But Sylveth was the High Matriarch. She had led her people through 30 years of exile. She had kept them alive when everyone said they would die. And now, for better or worse, she would face the hunter who had answered her call. She walked toward the docking bay, wondering if she was walking toward salvation or doom. The docking bay was cold and quiet. Sylveth stood near the main airlock with 2 guards on either side of her. They carried the only weapons the Veluxi had left, old pulse rifles that probably would not even scratch human armor. But the guards insisted on coming. They would not let their matriarch face the unknown alone. The airlock hissed open. A small shuttle had docked moments before, and now its single passenger stepped through the door. Sylveth had expected a monster. The stories said humans were terrifying creatures, built for war and destruction. She had imagined something massive and armored, with weapons built into its body and eyes that glowed with killing intent. What she saw was much stranger. The human was small, shorter than most adult Veluxi, with soft skin that had no scales or shell for protection. He wore a simple gray uniform with no armor at all. His face was flat, with 2 small eyes set close together, and he was making an expression that pulled his lips back to show his teeth. Sylveth felt her guards tense beside her. Baring teeth was a sign of aggression in most species, but the human's body language did not match the gesture. His shoulders were relaxed. His hands hung loose at his sides. His eyes were warm and calm. High Matriarch Sylveth, he said, still speaking perfect Veluxi. I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. And then he did something that shocked her completely. He bowed. It was a formal bow, the kind that showed respect to an equal or superior. Sylveth had seen diplomats from a dozen species, and she recognized the gesture immediately. This human, this commander of ships that had just destroyed an entire fleet, was treating her as an honored leader. Please, she managed to say, there is no need for such formality. You saved my people. If anyone should bow, it is me. Chen straightened up and smiled again. This time, knowing it was not aggression, Sylveth found the expression less disturbing. I have something for you, he said. He reached into his pocket. Her guards raised their weapons instantly. Chen paused and showed them his empty palm. Just a gift, he said calmly. No danger. Slowly, he pulled out a small device and held it out to Sylveth. It was a translator unit, sleek and advanced, far beyond anything the Veluxi possessed. This will allow you to communicate with any species in the galaxy, Chen explained. We make them for new contacts. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Sylveth took the device carefully. Her mind was racing with questions, but one pushed ahead of all the others. Why? She asked, why did you help us? What do you want in return? Chen's smile faded slightly. He looked at her with those small, intense eyes, and suddenly she could see something beneath the calm surface. Something old and deep and very, very patient. We have been watching the Kreth Dominion for 60 years, he said. We know what they do. We know how many worlds they have enslaved. We know about their gladiator pits, where they force captured beings to fight to the death for entertainment. Out! And when he spoke again, his voice was harder. 23 years ago, A Kreth raiding fleet intercepted a human colony ship in neutral space. The ship was called the Morning Star. It was carrying 30,000 colonists to a new world. Families, children, people just trying to find a new home. Sylveth felt a chill run through her body. What happened to them? The Kreth took them. All of them. We found the empty ship drifting in space 6 months later. The Kreth had stripped it of supplies and left it as a warning. Chun's hands, which had been relaxed before, now curled into fists at his sides. We sent diplomats to the Kreth Dominion. We asked them to return our people. They laughed at us. They said humans were weak, that we would make good slaves, that they would come for Earth itself. When they finished digesting our colonists, he took a breath and forced his hands to relax. So we began hunting. Them, quietly, carefully. We tracked their fleet movements. We studied their technology. We identified their leaders, the ones who gave the orders, the ones who ran the slave operations. We have been preparing for this confrontation for over 2 decades. Sylveth understood now. The humans had not come to save the Veluxi. They had come to hunt the Kreth. Her distress call had simply given them a reason to act openly. Your people, she said softly. The colonists from the Morning Star. Did you ever find them? Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. Some of them, not many. The Kreth worked them to death in their mines or killed them in the gladiator pits. The children were separated from their parents and sold to different worlds. We have rescued a few hundred over the years, but most of them are gone. He looked at Sylveth directly. The Kreth made a mistake when they attacked that ship. They thought we were weak because we did not want war. They thought we would accept the loss and move on. But they did not understand what they had done. They did not understand what humans are. Sylveth thought about the battle she had just witnessed. 11 ships destroying 23 dreadnoughts in 11 minutes. Perfect coordination. Absolute precision. No mercy, but also no cruelty. Just cold, efficient elimination. What are you? She asked. Chen's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it now. We are hunters, matriarch. On our homeworld, we were not the strongest creatures. We were not the fastest. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. But we survived because we learned to hunt. We learned to track our prey across any terrain. We learned to wait for the right moment. We learned to work together, to plan, to adapt. And eventually, we became the most dangerous hunters our world had ever seen. He gestured toward the viewport, where his ships hung silently in space. The galaxy sealed us away because they were afraid of what we could do. But we are not monsters, matriarch. We do not hunt the innocent. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We only hunt those who prey on others. He stepped closer to her, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. The Kreth made themselves our prey the day they took our people. Your distress call did not summon us. It simply told us where to find them. And now that we have started, we will not stop until every Kreth leader who participated in slavery is dead. Sylveth should have been terrified. She was standing before a predator who had just promised to wage war across the galaxy. But strangely, she felt something else instead. She felt safe. For 30 years, she had lived in fear of the Kreth. Now someone even more dangerous had declared war on them. And that someone, incredibly, was on her side. What happens to my people? She asked. What do you want from us? Chen shook his head. We want nothing from you. You are free to go wherever you wish, to rebuild your civilization however you choose. We ask only one thing. What is that? Stay out of our way when we move against the Kreth. What comes next will not be pleasant to watch. Sylveth nodded slowly. She thought about warning the Kreth, telling them what was coming. But then she remembered 30 years of running, of hiding, of watching her people die because the Kreth wanted to make an example of anyone who resisted. No, she would not warn them. The hunters had come, and the Kreth had earned everything that was about to happen. The news spread through the Kreth, dominion like fire through dry grass. War Master Goreth had been defeated. His fleet had been shattered by a handful of enemy ships. And the enemy was not some rival empire or rebellion. The enemy was something far worse. Humans were coming. At first, most Kreth did not believe it. Humans were old stories, myths from ancient times. Some said they were monsters with supernatural powers. Others said they did not exist at all, that they were just a legend created to frighten children. But then the reports started arriving from the outer colonies. A Kreth military base on the moon of Vexor was gone. Not destroyed in battle, just gone. The soldiers had vanished in the night, and the only thing left behind was a message burned into the metal floor. We are watching. A slave transport carrying 3,000 captives was intercepted in deep space. The guards were killed silently, without a single alarm being raised. The slaves were released and given coordinates to a safe world. The ship was left drifting with another message. They belonged to themselves now. Kreth general known for his cruelty was found dead in his own bedroom. His throat cut, his bodyguards still standing at their posts. Never knowing anything had passed them. The message on the wall said simply, "You were on the list." Goreth retreated to the Dominion throne world, a heavily fortified planet called Kreth Prime. He surrounded himself with every ship the Dominion could gather. 300 warships formed a defensive sphere around the planet. Orbital weapons platforms armed with planet-killing missiles covered every approach. Ancient war machines from the first expansion were brought out of storage and activated. Goroth stood before the assembled admirals and generals and declared that the humans were not invincible. He said that his defeat had been a trick, an ambush, nothing more. He said that with the full might of the Dominion gathered in one place, no enemy could hope to break through. The admirals nodded and agreed. The generals shouted promises of victory, but Goroth could see the fear in their eyes. They had all heard the reports. They all knew what was coming. 3 days later, the humans arrived. The sensor stations detected them first. 9 to 4 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were arranged in a perfect formation, black vessels covered in red tally marks, moving with the silent grace that had become the signature of human warships. Goreth ordered his fleet to attack. 300 ships moved to intercept, but before anyone could fire a single weapon, a transmission cut through every communication channel in the system. It was a human voice, calm and measured, speaking perfect Kreth. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Hunter Fleets. I am broadcasting to every citizen, soldier, and slave in the Kreth Dominion. Listen carefully, because I will only say this once." Goroth tried to jam the signal. His technicians worked frantically at their consoles, but the human transmission could not be stopped. It played on every screen, every speaker, every device capable of receiving a signal. "We are not here for your species," Chen continued. "We are not here to conquer your worlds or enslave your people. We are here for one purpose only. We are here for the leaders who have committed crimes against our people and against countless others." List appeared on every screen in the system. Names, hundreds of names, war masters, generals, admirals, slave traders, commanders of raids and attacks, officials who had authorized the capture and torture of innocent beings. Goroth saw his own name at the top of the list. "These individuals are responsible for the deaths of millions," Chen said. "They are responsible for slavery, torture, and the destruction of entire civilizations. They have chosen to be predators, and we are the hunters who have come to end their reign." The transmission paused. When it continued, Chen's voice was harder. "We are giving you a choice. Surrender the individuals on this list, and you will live. Your planet will not be harmed. Your families will not be touched. You will be free to rebuild your society without the monsters who have led you into darkness." Another pause. "Protect them, and you will share their fate. You have 1 hour to decide." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge of Goroth's flagship. Every officer was staring at the list on their screens. Every soldier was thinking about their families on the planet below. Goroth roared at them to ignore the message. He screamed that the humans were bluffing, that they could not possibly defeat 300 ships. He threatened to execute anyone who showed cowardice. But then something unexpected happened. Junior officer drew his sidearm and pointed it at Goroth. "I have children," the officer said. His voice was shaking, but his hand was steady. "I will not let them die because of you." Goroth reached for his own weapon, but before he could draw it, 2 more officers stepped forward with their guns raised. Then 3 more. Then 10. On the planet below, crowds gathered outside government buildings. They chanted the names on the list and demanded that the criminals be handed over. Soldiers refused orders from their commanders. Police stood aside as citizens stormed the homes of the guilty. Across the Dominion, the same scene played out on every world. Decades of fear and oppression broke apart in a single hour. The Kreth people, who had been ruled by terror for generations, finally saw that their rulers were afraid of something. And if the rulers were afraid, then they could be defeated. Before the hour was up, Goroth was in chains. His guards had turned on him. His admirals had surrendered. The 300 ships of the Great Fleet hung motionless in space, their weapons powered down, their crews waiting to see what the humans would do next. The answer came quickly. Human. Shuttles descended to Kreth Prime. Soldiers in dark armor emerged and collected the prisoners, checking each one against the list. They were professional and efficient. They did not steal. They did not loot. They did not harm anyone who was not on the list. High Matriarch Sylveth watched the events unfold from her station in the Outer Veil. She had access to the galactic news networks now, and she could see the broadcasts from Kreth Prime. She could see the crowds cheering as the slave traders were led away. She could see the freed captives streaming out of the labor camps, blinking in the sunlight for the first time in years, and she finally understood what made the humans so terrifying. It was not their weapons, though those were devastating. It was not their ships, though those were faster and stronger than anything else in the galaxy. It was not even their willingness to kill, though they did that very well when needed. What made the humans terrifying was their patience, their precision, their ability to understand their enemies so completely that they could destroy them without single unnecessary death. The Kreth had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. The humans had dismantled that fear in a single hour, not by being more terrifying, but by showing the Kreth people that they did not have to be afraid anymore. Sylveth thought about all the species the Kreth had conquered, all the worlds they had enslaved, all the civilizations they had destroyed. For centuries, everyone had accepted that the Kreth were too powerful to stop. But the humans had not accepted that. The humans had decided that the Kreth were prey. And when humans hunted, she now understood. They did not stop until the hunt was complete. On her screen, she watched Admiral Chen step onto the surface of Kreth Prime. He walked through the crowds of cheering citizens, acknowledging them with small nods but never stopping. He had work to do, justice to deliver. The hunt was almost over, but the galaxy, Sylveth knew, would never be the same. 6 months passed since the fall of the Kreth Dominion. The trials were held on a neutral world, broadcast across the entire galaxy. Goroth and the other leaders on the list faced justice for their crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of survivors testified about the horrors they had endured. The recordings from slave ships and labor camps were shown to audiences on 100 worlds. The guilty were not executed. The humans had insisted on that. Death, they said, was too quick, too easy. Instead, the convicted were sentenced to work in the reconstruction efforts, helping to rebuild the worlds they had destroyed. They would spend the rest of their lives repairing the damage they had caused. Some in the galaxy called it mercy. Others called it cruelty. The Veluxi, who had suffered so much at Kreth's hands, called it justice. High Matriarch Sylveth had spent those 6 months rebuilding her people's hope. The Veloxi station in the Outer Veil had become a hub for refugees from across the galaxy. Former slaves who had nowhere else to go found shelter there. Ships brought supplies and medicine. Engineers came to help repair the aging systems, and much of that help came from the humans. Admiral Chen had kept his promise. The human ships had left Kreth space as soon as the prisoners were secured. They had made no claims to territory, demanded no tribute, established no colonies in the conquered regions. They had simply disappeared back into Sector 7G, like ghosts fading into the shadows. But they had not forgotten the Veluxy. Cargo ships arrived at the station every week, carrying food and medical supplies and construction materials. Human engineers worked alongside Veluxy technicians to upgrade the station's life support systems. Human doctors treated the sick and injured without asking for payment. When Sylveth asked why they were helping, the humans always gave the same answer, because it was the right thing to do. Now, 6 months after that first desperate distress call, Admiral Chen returned to the station. His shuttle docked at the same bay where they had first met. But this time, there were no armed guards waiting. There was only Sylveth, standing alone, waiting to greet an old friend. Chen stepped through the airlock and smiled when he saw her. It was a warm smile, genuine and kind. Nothing like the cold expression he had worn when discussing the Kreth. "Matriarch Sylveth," he said. "It is good to see you again, Admiral Chen." She touched his shoulder in the Veluxy gesture of friendship. "You honor us with your visit." They walked through the station together. Everywhere they went, Veluxy stopped to stare at the human. Some bowed. Others reached out to touch his arm, as if to confirm he was real. Children pointed and whispered to each other. "I think you are a hero," Sylveth said. Chen shook his head. "I am just a soldier doing his job. You've saved their lives. You freed them from a threat they thought would never end. To them, you are much more than a soldier." They reached an observation deck overlooking the nebula. Stars glittered in the distance, and the swirling colors of the cosmic cloud painted the darkness with light. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the beauty of the universe. "I have something to ask you," Sylveth said finally. "A question that has troubled me since the day you first came here. Ask, will you leave? Now that the Kreth are defeated, will the humans return to their isolation? Will you seal yourselves away again and pretend the rest of us do not exist?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Quarantine was never meant to last forever. We sealed ourselves away because we were afraid of what we might become. We had just destroyed an entire civilization. The Vorthax attacked us, yes, but we responded with a fury that scared even ourselves. We needed time to think. Time to decide what kind of species we wanted to be. He turned to face her. We spent centuries asking ourselves that question. We built great cities and explored our own corner of space. We created art and music and philosophy. We tried to become more than just hunters, more than just killers. And eventually we found our answer. What answer? Chen looked out at the stars. We are hunters. That is what we are, and nothing can change it. But we get to choose what we hunt. We get to choose who we protect. The Vorthax attacked the innocent, so we hunted them. The Kreth enslaved the helpless, so we hunted them. We will not apologize for what we are, but we will use what we are to make the galaxy safer for those who cannot protect themselves. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was a data chip no larger than his thumb. It contains coordinates to the Sol system. To Earth, our homeworld. He held it out to Sylveth. Consider it an invitation. The Veluxy are welcome to visit us whenever you wish. To trade with us. To learn from us. To teach us. We have hidden from the galaxy for too long. It is time we rejoined it. Svelfith took the chip with trembling claws. She understood the weight of what she was holding. For 2,000 years, no species had been allowed into human space. The quarantine had been absolute. And now, here was the key to humanity's home, given freely to a species that had been hunted and afraid just 6 months ago. "Why us?" she asked. "Of all the species in the galaxy, why offer this to the Veluxy?" Chen smiled. "Because you called for help when you had no reason to believe help would come? Because you faced impossible odds and refused to surrender? Because when we arrived, you treated us with dignity and respect, even though you were terrified of what we might be?" He put his hand on her shoulder, a human gesture of friendship. "The galaxy sealed us away because they feared what we could do. You were the first to see what we choose to do. That takes courage, and courage deserves to be rewarded." Sylveth felt tears forming in her compound eyes. For 30 years, she had led her people through darkness and despair. She had watched friends die and children grow up never knowing safety. And now, because of a desperate call sent into the void, Her people had found not just protectors, but allies, partners, friends. "What happens now?" she asked. "What will the humans do next?" Chen turned back to the observation window. In the distance, beyond the nebula, other stars waited. Other worlds. Other species who might be suffering under other tyrants. "We will watch," he said. "We will wait. And when someone cries out for help, and the innocent are threatened by those who think power gives them the right to abuse others, we will come." His voice hardened slightly. Taking on that edge, she remembered from their first meeting. The galaxy should know something. The Kreth were not the first predators we have hunted, and they will not be the last. There are others out there, slavers, conquerors, monsters who think no one can stop them. He looked at Sylveth with those small, intense eyes. They are wrong. Because now, they know the truth. They know what waits in Sector 7G. They know that if they prey on the helpless, the hunters will come for them. He smiled. And this time there was nothing warm about it. And we never stop hunting. Sylveth looked at the data chip in her hands, then out at the stars. She thought about all the worlds out there, all the species living in fear of those stronger than them. And she thought about the black ships with their red tally marks, silent and patient, waiting in the darkness. The Galactic Council had been wrong about the humans. They had sealed them away because they thought humans were monsters. But humans were not the monsters. They were the galaxy's answer to monsters. And as long as predators existed, the hunters would be there watching, waiting, ready, because that was what humans did. They hunted, and they never stopped.